I want a divorce. As Ethan's words echoed in my mind, I stared at the legal papers in my trembling hands. After 25 years of marriage, he was leaving me for his pregnant mistress. Rage consumed me. He had no idea what I was capable of. My name is Natalie Pierce, and I've been a devoted housewife and mother in suburban Los Angeles for as long as I can remember. At 48, I thought I had it all figured out: a loving husband, 2 grown daughters, and a comfortable life. But in one cruel moment, everything changed. "Ethan, how could you do this to me, to our family?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "We've been together for a quarter of a century. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" He couldn't even look me in the eye as he shrugged, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I'm sorry, Natalie, but I've found someone else, and she's pregnant. It's time for me to move on." Move on? Just like that? I felt like I'd been sucker punched. The wind knocked out of me. The man I'd loved, the father of my children, was tossing me aside like a used tissue. As if on cue, our eldest daughter, Vanessa, burst into the room, her fiancé Luke trailing behind her. "Mom, we heard everything," she said, rushing to my side and enveloping me in a hug. "Don't worry, we're here for you. We'll move in and help you through this." I clung to her, grateful for the support, but little did I know that my own daughter would soon betray me too. Ethan was already gone, his suitcase in hand, off to start his new life with his mistress. And I was left alone, drowning in a sea of hurt and betrayal. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa and Luke made themselves at home in my house, but not in the way I'd hoped. They were inconsiderate roommates, leaving messes everywhere and expecting me to wait on them hand and foot. I tried to talk to them about contributing to household chores and expenses, but they always had an excuse. "Mom, we're just trying to get on our feet," Vanessa would say, her tone condescending. "You can't expect us to pay rent right now." Meanwhile, Ethan's lawyer was pressuring me to sell the family home as part of the divorce settlement. It was the only thing I had left, the one piece of stability in my life, and they wanted to take that away, too. I felt like I was suffocating, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But little did I know, the worst was yet to come. Vanessa and Luke had one more surprise in store for me, one that would shatter what little faith I had left in the people I loved most. Living with Vanessa and Luke was a nightmare. They treated my home like a hotel, expecting me to cater to their every whim. I found myself constantly cleaning up after them, washing their dishes, and doing their laundry. It was as if they'd forgotten I was their mother, not their maid. One evening, I decided enough was enough. I called a family meeting, determined to set some boundaries. "Vanessa, Luke, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. "If you're going to live here, you need to start contributing to the household chores and expenses." Vanessa rolled her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. "Mom, we're just trying to save money for our wedding. You can't expect us to pay rent on top of that." "Yeah, Natalie," Luke chimed in, his tone dripping with condescension. "We're family. Isn't that what family does? Help each other out?" I felt my blood boil. How dare they use the family card against me? "Family also respects each other," I shot back. "And right now, I don't feel very respected in my own home." But my words fell on deaf ears. Vanessa and Luke continued to live as if they owned the place, leaving me to pick up the pieces. I started to dread coming home, knowing I'd be greeted by a sink full of dirty dishes and a living room littered with their belongings. To make matters worse, Ethan's lawyer kept hounding me about selling the house. "It's the only way to ensure a fair division of assets," he insisted, his voice cold and calculating. "Your husband has made it clear he wants his share of the property." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the home where I'd raised my children, the place where I'd poured my heart and soul into creating a loving family. And now they wanted me to just give it up without a fight? I tried to reason with Ethan, hoping to appeal to his sense of decency. "Please, Ethan," I begged, my voice cracking with emotion. "This is our family home. Can't we find another way to settle this?" But he was unmoved, his eyes hard and unfeeling. "I'm sorry, Natalie, but I have to think about my future with my new family now. The house has to go." I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face. It seemed like everyone I loved was turning against me, more concerned with their own selfish desires than the family we'd built together. That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and revenge. How could they do this to me? After all the years I devoted to being a loving wife and mother, this was how they repaid me? I knew I had to fight back, to stand up for myself and what was rightfully mine. But how? I was just one woman against a system that seemed rigged against me. As I tossed and turned, a plan began to form in my mind. I would hire a lawyer of my own, someone who could help me navigate the treacherous waters of divorce court, and I would start digging into Ethan's finances, looking for any dirt I could use against him. I may have been down, but I was far from out. Ethan and Vanessa had no idea what I was capable of when pushed to the brink. They thought they could walk all over me, but they were about to learn the hard way that Natalie Pierce was not a woman to be underestimated. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Vanessa and Luke dropped another bombshell on me. They called a family meeting, their faces smug and self-satisfied as they sat me down on the couch. "Mom, we have some big news," Vanessa announced, barely able to contain her excitement. "Luke and I are moving out. We've bought a condo." I stared at them in disbelief, my mouth hanging open. "A condo? But how? You said you were saving for your wedding." Luke chuckled, his arm draped possessively around Vanessa's shoulders. "Well, that's the other part of the news. Your dear ex-husband has been very generous. He's been financing our lifestyle and even helped with the down payment on the condo." I felt like I'd been slapped in the face. Ethan, the man who had betrayed me, was now conspiring with my own daughter against me. It was too much to bear. "Vanessa, how could you?" I whispered, my voice trembling with hurt and anger. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me." She shrugged, her eyes cold and uncaring. "Oh, come on, Mom. It's not like you were going to help us out. You're too busy wallowing in your own self-pity to care about anyone else." I recoiled as if I'd been physically struck. My own daughter speaking to me with such cruelty and disdain. I hardly recognized the woman sitting before me. "And honestly, Mom," Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with condescension, "it's time you started taking care of yourself. I mean, look at you. When was the last time you bought new clothes or got a haircut? You're letting yourself go." I glanced down at my worn jeans and faded t-shirt, suddenly feeling self-conscious. It was true, I hadn't been taking care of myself lately. But, with everything going on, who could blame me? Luke nodded in agreement, his eyes raking over me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Vanessa's right, Natalie. You're not getting any younger. If you want to attract a new man, you're going to have to step up your game." I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me. My own daughter and her fiancé, judging me and mocking me in my own home. It was too much to bear. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Get out of my house, both of you, and don't come back." Vanessa and Luke exchanged a glance, their expressions a mixture of surprise and amusement. "Fine," Vanessa said, standing up and smoothing her designer dress. "We'll be out by the end of the week, but don't come crying to us when you're all alone and miserable." With that, they walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking with sobs. How had my life come to this? My husband had left me, my daughter had betrayed me, and now I was going to be all alone in this big empty house. But as I sat there, wallowing in my own misery, a thought occurred to me. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let Ethan and Vanessa and Luke destroy me. I was going to fight back, and I was going to make them pay for what they'd done. I stood up, wiping the tears from my face. It was time to take control of my life, to show them what Natalie Pierce was really made of. I was going to hire the best divorce attorney in town, and I was going to make sure I got everything I deserved in the settlement. And as for Vanessa and Luke, they had no idea what was coming for them. They thought they could just walk away and leave me with nothing, but they were wrong. I was going to make them regret the day they ever crossed me. The day after Vanessa and Luke's cruel announcement, I decided to take stock of my finances. I had always trusted Ethan to handle our money, but now I couldn't help but wonder if he had been hiding something from me. I logged into our joint savings account, my heart pounding with anticipation. What I saw there made my blood run cold. The account, which had once held a substantial sum, was now nearly empty. Ethan had drained it, leaving me with barely enough to cover the mortgage. I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. How could he do this to me, to our family? I had always been so careful with money, scrimping and saving to ensure we had a comfortable future. And now, it was all gone. Just then the doorbell rang. I dragged myself to the front door, only to find Vanessa and Luke standing there, their faces etched with false concern. "Mom, we need to talk," Vanessa said, pushing past me into the house. "It's about the divorce settlement." I followed them into the living room, my stomach churning with dread. "What about it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Luke cleared his throat, his eyes darting around the room. "Well, Vanessa and I were thinking, with Dad's assets frozen, it might be best if you just sell the house and give us the proceeds. That way, we can all move on with our lives." I stared at them in disbelief, my mouth hanging open. "You want me to sell my home? The place where I raised my children? And give you the money?" Vanessa rolled her eyes, her arms crossed over her chest. "Oh, come on, Mom. It's not like you need this big house all to yourself. And Luke and I could really use the money to furnish our new condo." I felt a wave of anger wash over me, hot and fierce. How dare they? How dare they come into my home and try to manipulate me like this? "Absolutely not," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "This is my home, and I'm not giving it up. Not for you. Not for anyone." Luke's face twisted into a sneer, his eyes narrowing with contempt. "Fine, but don't come crying to us when you can't afford to keep the lights on. We're done here." With that, they stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind them. I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands. I had never felt so alone, so betrayed. My own flesh and blood, turning against me like this. But as I sat there, wallowing in my own misery, a thought occurred to me. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to let Ethan and Vanessa and Luke take everything from me. I was going to fight back, and I was going to make them pay. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of a divorce attorney I had seen advertised on TV. "Hello," I said, my voice steady and determined. "My name is Natalie Pierce, and I need your help. My husband has been hiding assets from me, and I want to make sure I get what I deserve in the divorce settlement." The attorney listened intently, asking me questions about my situation. By the end of the call, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could come out of this nightmare with my dignity intact, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Ethan and Vanessa and Luke were formidable opponents, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. I was going to have to be smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than I had ever been before. I stood up, squaring my shoulders. It was time to take control of my life, to show them what Natalie Pierce was really made of. I was going to hire a private investigator to uncover all of Ethan's dirty secrets, and I was going to use them to destroy him in court. And as for Vanessa and Luke, they had no idea what was coming for them. They thought they could just walk away and leave me with nothing, but they were wrong. I was going to make them regret the day they ever crossed me. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let Ethan and Vanessa destroy me without a fight. I picked up the phone and called the divorce attorney I had spoken to the day before. "Miss Pierce, I'm glad you called," the attorney said, her voice crisp and professional. "I've been thinking about your case, and I believe we have a strong chance of getting you a favorable settlement." I felt a glimmer of hope, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. "What do we need to do?" I asked, my voice steady. "First, we need to gather evidence of your husband's financial misdeeds," the attorney said. "I recommend hiring a private investigator to dig into his records and uncover any hidden assets." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I can do that. What else?" "We'll also need to build a case for why you deserve to keep the house and receive alimony," the attorney continued. "I'll need you to provide documentation of your marriage, your financial contributions to the household, and any sacrifices you made for the sake of your family." I felt a lump form in my throat. I had given up so much for Ethan and our children, and now it seemed like it had all been for nothing. But I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the task at hand. "I'll get you everything you need," I said, my voice firm. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly with the attorney and the private investigator to build my case. The PI uncovered evidence of Ethan's extensive financial misdeeds, including hidden offshore accounts and investments he had never told me about. I was stunned by the depth of his deception. How could the man I had loved and trusted for so many years be capable of such betrayal? But I didn't have time to dwell on those thoughts. I had to focus on the fight ahead. Finally, the day of the confrontation arrived. I invited Ethan over to the house, telling him I wanted to discuss the divorce settlement. When he arrived, he was surprised to find me sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of documents in front of me. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice wary. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "This, my dear husband, is evidence of your extensive financial misdeeds. Hidden accounts, investments, all the money you've been funneling away behind my back." Ethan's face paled, and he took a step back. "Natally, I can explain." But I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Save it, Ethan. I know everything. And if you don't agree to a fair settlement, I'll make sure the judge knows everything, too." Ethan's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he might lash out at me. But then his shoulders slumped, and he let out a defeated sigh. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "I want the house, and I want alimony, and if you don't agree, I'll expose every dirty secret you've ever tried to hide." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he knew he was beaten. "Fine," he spat out. "You'll get what you want." I sat back in my chair, a sense of triumph washing over me. I had done it. I had stood up to Ethan and won. But even as I savored my victory, I knew the battle was far from over. Vanessa and Luke were still out there, and they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. I had to be ready for them. I had to be stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than ever before. But for now, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, and I walked into the courthouse with my head held high. My attorney had assured me that we had a strong case, but I couldn't help feeling a sense of trepidation. As I took my seat in the courtroom, I caught sight of Ethan sitting at the opposite table. He looked haggard and worn, as if the stress of the divorce had taken its toll on him, but I felt no sympathy for him. He had brought this upon himself. The judge called the court to order, and my attorney stood up to present our case. She laid out the evidence of Ethan's financial misdeeds, painting a picture of a man who had consistently lied and cheated his way through our marriage. Ethan's attorney tried to counter our arguments, but it was clear that he was fighting a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming, and even the judge seemed skeptical of Ethan's claims. Finally, it was time for Ethan to take the stand. My attorney grilled him mercilessly, forcing him to admit to his lies and deceptions. With each admission, I could see his credibility crumbling before the court's eyes. And then, in a moment of desperation, Ethan lashed out at me. "You're one to talk about honesty, Natalie," he snarled. "You've been lying to me for years, pretending to be the perfect wife while you were really just a cold, heartless bitch." The courtroom fell silent, and I could feel all eyes on me. But I refused to let Ethan's words get to me. I stood up, my voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, I have been a devoted wife and mother for 25 years. I have sacrificed everything for my family, only to be betrayed and abandoned by the man I trusted most. Ethan's lies and manipulations have caused me immeasurable pain and suffering, and I am asking the court to grant me what I am rightfully owed." The judge nodded, his expression unreadable. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he delivered his ruling. "After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I am granting Mrs. Pierce's request for a favorable divorce settlement. She will retain ownership of the family home and receive alimony payments from Mr. Pierce. Furthermore, I am ordering Mr. Pierce to pay Mrs. Pierce's legal fees and court costs." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and I had to fight back tears of joy. I had won. I had beaten Ethan at his own game. As I walked out of the courthouse, I caught sight of Ethan standing on the steps, his face contorted with rage. He stormed over to me, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you've won, Natalie?" he snarled. "You think you can just take everything from me and walk away? Well, think again. I'll make you pay for this, I swear to God." But I just smiled, my voice calm and steady. "You've already lost, Ethan. You've lost your wife, your children, and your dignity. There's nothing left for you to take from me." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Ethan to stew in his own bitterness and resentment. I had faced my demons and emerged victorious, and nothing he could say or do could take that away from me. But even as I savored my triumph, I knew that my battle was far from over. Vanessa and Luke were still out there, and they would be furious when they learned of the court's decision. I had to be prepared for their retaliation. I had to be ready to fight back with everything I had. But for now, I allowed myself a moment of peace. I had taken back control of my life, and I was never going to let anyone take it from me again. A few weeks after the divorce settlement, I received a frantic call from Vanessa. "Mom, you have to help us," she pleaded, her voice trembling with panic. "The bank is foreclosing on our condo. We missed too many payments, and now they're saying we have to move out." I felt a twinge of satisfaction at the news. After all the pain and suffering they had caused me, it seemed only fitting that Vanessa and Luke were now facing the consequences of their own actions. But I kept my voice neutral as I replied, "I'm sorry to hear that, Vanessa, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it." "Mom, please," Vanessa begged. "We have nowhere else to go. Can't we just stay with you for a little while until we get back on our feet?" I almost laughed out loud at the irony of the situation. Just a few short months ago, Vanessa and Luke had been more than happy to leave me high and dry, with no regard for my own well-being. And now they were coming to me for help? But I kept my composure as I replied, "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Vanessa. You and Luke are adults, and you need to take responsibility for your own choices. I can't keep bailing you out every time you get into trouble." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then Vanessa's voice turned cold and bitter. "Fine. I should have known better than to ask for your help. You've always been a selfish, heartless bitch." I felt a surge of anger at her words, but I refused to let her see how much they hurt me. "Goodbye, Vanessa," I said firmly, and then I hung up the phone. A few days later, I received another call, this time from Ethan's mistress. "Natalie, it's me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm leaving Ethan. I can't do this anymore." I felt a sense of grim satisfaction at the news. It seemed that Ethan's web of lies and deceit was finally unraveling, and everyone he had hurt was starting to turn against him. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, trying to keep the triumph out of my voice. "But I can't say I'm surprised. Ethan has a way of using people and then discarding them when he's done." The mistress was silent for a moment, and then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Natalie. I never meant to hurt you. I was just so caught up in Ethan's charm and promises that I didn't stop to think about the consequences." I felt a sudden rush of empathy for the woman on the other end of the line. She had been just as much a victim of Ethan's manipulations as I had been. "I understand," I said softly, "and I appreciate your apology, but now it's time for both of us to move on and rebuild our lives without Ethan." The mistress agreed, and we ended the call on a note of mutual understanding and respect. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly free. Free from Ethan's lies and manipulations, free from Vanessa and Luke's selfishness and greed. I had faced my demons and emerged victorious, and now it was time for me to start a new chapter in my life. A chapter filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a brighter future. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I had proven to myself that I was stronger than I ever imagined, and I knew that I could handle anything that life threw my way. With a smile on my face and a spring in my step, I walked out of my house and into the bright, sunny day, ready to embrace whatever the future had in store for me. As I sat in my living room, surrounded by the familiar comforts of home, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me to this moment. Just a few short months ago, my life had been turned upside down by the selfishness and betrayal of those closest to me. Ethan, the man I had loved and trusted for 25 years, had abandoned me for a younger woman and left me to pick up the pieces of our shattered marriage. Vanessa and Luke, the children I had raised and nurtured, had turned their backs on me and tried to take advantage of my vulnerability. But through it all, I had found a strength and resilience within myself that I never knew I possessed. I had fought back against their lies and manipulations, and I had emerged victorious. Now, as I looked around at the home that I had fought so hard to keep, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was my sanctuary, my refuge from the chaos and pain of the outside world. I thought back to the moment when Ethan had threatened me outside the courthouse, his eyes blazing with fury and resentment. "You'll pay for this, Natalie," he had snarled. "I'll make sure of it." But I had stood my ground, my voice calm and steady. "You've already lost, Ethan," I had replied. "There's nothing left for you to take from me." And I had been right. In the weeks and months that followed, I watched as Ethan's life unraveled before my eyes. His mistress left him, his assets were frozen, and he was facing the legal consequences of his actions. Vanessa and Luke, too, had faced the repercussions of their choices. Their condo had been foreclosed, and they had been left with nowhere to go. They had come crawling back to me, begging for help and forgiveness. But I had stood firm in my resolve. "You are adults," I had told them, "and you need to take responsibility for your own choices. I cannot keep bailing you out every time you get into trouble." It had been a difficult decision, but I knew that it was the right one. Vanessa and Luke needed to learn that their actions had consequences, and that they couldn't always rely on others to clean up their messes. As for me, I had found a new sense of purpose and fulfillment in my life. I had transformed my home into a successful bed and breakfast, welcoming guests from all over the world and sharing with them the beauty and warmth of my hospitality. I had also reconnected with old friends and made new ones, building a support system of people who truly cared about me and had my best interests at heart. And through it all, I had learned to embrace my own happiness and well-being. I no longer defined myself by my relationships with others, but by my own strengths and accomplishments. As I sat in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of my hard work and determination, I felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over me. I had faced my demons and emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. I knew that there would be challenges and obstacles ahead, but I was ready to face them head-on. I had proven to myself that I was capable of overcoming anything that life threw my way, and I knew that I would continue to do so. With a smile on my face and a heart full of hope, I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the beautiful world beyond. The future was bright and full of possibility, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms.